You'll find in your order of worship a little bit of history about the piece that the choir just sang. You can read that later. Don't read it during my sermon. I'm going to be watching you. It was the summer of 2013. I was not a pastor. It had been like 3 years since I served my last church. I really did not think that I would ever serve as a pastor again. I was in Las Vegas on business, the city that's said to represent everything that is anti-church, everything depraved that is within us. Early one morning, I went for a run on the Strip. The streets early in the morning were already covered with people. Some were shopping, some were on their way to another casino, while others were on their way to do who knows what, to fulfill their most selfish desires. As I ran along, I noticed that all of the electronic billboards suddenly changed, displaying a picture of a young man in words that read, David Van Buskirk, 1977-2013. Las Vegas Police Search and Rescue Officer. I soon learned that Van Buskirk was killed while rescuing a hiker stranded in an off-limits area of a mountain northwest of Las Vegas when he fell from a helicopter hoist line. I ran a few more blocks until I noticed that the people who were walking up and down the busy sidewalks began to stop and peer down the street that was suddenly empty of traffic. The entire strip, which was booming with the sounds of automobiles and people enjoying themselves, became profoundly silent. A man removed his hat. A woman covered her heart with her hand. A little boy sitting on his father's shoulders saluted. I stopped running. And with everyone else, my eyes turned toward the street where we watched and listened as a very long police motorcycle motorcade produced the only sound on the hushed strip. The motorcade was followed by a white police pickup truck carrying a flag-draped casket. People remained silent and still for several more minutes. Some bowed their heads. Others wiped tears from their faces. Others embraced their loved ones. Here's some questions that ran through my mind as someone who called himself an ex-pastor, maybe an ex-churchgoer. What was it that stopped the traffic that morning on one of the most busiest streets in all of America? What was it that got everyone's attention? What was it that caused tears to well up in people's eyes? What was it that got even the most indulgent, decadent one in the heart of Sin City to believe in something greater than theirself? What was it that turned eyes away from reveling in drunkenness, debauchery, and licentiousness, quarreling and jealousy, and toward selflessness and sacrifice? What is it that has the power to change the world? It's the very power that is the heart of our Christian faith, or should be the heart of our faith. It's the power that caused firefighters and police officers and first responders to run into the Twin Towers on 9/11 when everyone else was running out of them. It's the power that has sent John Mundy and hundreds of volunteers back to Texas this weekend. And it's the power behind our prayers for Florida and the Caribbean. It's the power that gives generously to disaster relief funds like Week of Compassion. It's the power that can unite our government to save the lives of the dreamers. It's the force that created the universe, this good earth, and everything, living thing in it. It's the source of all life. It's the burning compulsion to liberate God's people from the evils of oppression and slavery. It's the fire in the prophet's voice to welcome the foreigner, defend the orphan, stand up for the poor, and take care of the widow. It's the drive that sent Emmanuel into the world, not to condemn the world, but to love the world, to save the world. It's the energy that continues to pour out the very Spirit of God on all flesh, to overwhelm evil and overcome death. It's the power of love. Pure, unconditional, unreserved, unrelenting, passionate love that propels action, deep love that compels sacrifice. Jesus said there is no greater power in the world than the power of love compelling one to lay down one's life for another. And Jesus says there is no greater commandment than to love your neighbor as yourself. To the Corinthians, Paul writes about faith, hope, and love, but says that the greatest of these is love. And if love is not in our words, even in our confessions of faith, then Paul says we're only making noise. If love is not the heart of all that we do, we are nothing. To the Romans, Paul echoes the words of Jesus. You shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet. And any other commandment are summed up in this one word. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. And Paul writes that now is the moment that we need to wake up and understand that what this world needs now is love. And as Dionne Warwick sings, not just for some, but for everyone. Sadly, though, when it comes to loving all people, too many Christians keep hitting the snooze button. Too many Christians out there are pulling the covers up over their heads, closing their eyes while they selflessly sleep. For whatever reason, self-preservation, control, greed, to protect their privileged positions. Christians seek darkness over light, judgment over grace, exclusion over acceptance, and hate over love. John calls them false prophets who possess the spirit of the Antichrist and a spirit of error in 1 John 4. And then stressing how essential it is for Christians to possess a spirit of love, John pleads, love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and God's love is perfected in us. There on the Las Vegas Strip, I began to think about the rescue of that stranded hiker. Van Buskirk probably did not know anything about that hiker. He didn't know whether the hiker was male or female, rich or poor, Democrat or Republican, gay or straight or transgendered, documented or undocumented, Muslim or Jewish or Christian, black, brown, or white. He didn't know if this person would ever contribute to society or even give one dime to the Fraternal Order of the Police. He just knew that this stranded hiker needed some help. He just knew that this hiker was probably afraid. This hiker was probably hungry, thirsty, wounded, and Van Buskirk was called to protect and to serve. Van Buskirk wasn't concerned about breaking any religious, cultural, or political rules. His only concern was rescuing the perishing, saving the lost. And it was in that moment that something inside of me woke up. It was like an alarm went off inside of my soul. Love, pure, unconditional, unreserved, unrelenting, passionate love pierced my heart. Deep love roused me from my self-absorbed slumber. And there in the middle of the Miracle Mile, I began to pray. God, if you give me an opportunity to pastor again, I'm going to do all that I can to lead your people to love others more than self, to serve and protect courageously, graciously, expecting absolutely nothing in return. God, I will try my best to lead your church with great worship services. We'll light some candles. We'll have a beautiful choir. We'll ring some chimes. But more importantly, I will lead your people to worship you out in the community, out in this world with great service. And I will lead them to do it with no strings attached, selflessly, sacrificially, always lovingly. Lord, together we will comfort the fearful, we will feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, heal the wounded, not because they might believe like we believe, contribute to our budget, or even attend one of our worship services, but simply because they need help. Lord, we will serve without prejudice, without judgment. We will love all people, and all means all. In the early service, I said, as soon as I got home from Vegas, this business trip, I got a phone call, but that's not exactly true. I received the phone call before I left Vegas. I received a phone call from the search committee of the First Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Farmville, North Carolina, asking me if I would be open to serving as their pastor. And 4 years later, I stand before you today believing that what the world needs now more than anything is for the church to wake up. I love the words that were read when we lit this candle, to recover. We need to recover something. We need to wake up, recover, rediscover what is the heart of our faith. Love. Not just for some, but for everyone. I love the quote from German Lutheran theologian of the early 17th century, Rupertus Maldinius, that is usually printed in our order of service when we have room for it. In essentials, unity. In non-essentials, diversity. In all things, love. When thinking about what is essential to our faith, most Christians are very quick to jump right to our confession of faith. Jesus is Lord, that's essential. You got to make that confession of faith, Jesus is Lord, or you're nothing. But we can say, Jesus is Lord all day long. We can say it around this table, from the pews, we can say it from our pulpits, but if we don't have love, we're only making noise. We can say we love God, but if we don't love our neighbors, John says we're liars. And perhaps this is why Jesus says, many will call me Lord. Yet I will have to say to them, depart from me, for I never knew you. Love is our essential. It is what is fundamental to who we are as Christians. And it is in this essential that we must be unified. Then in non-essentials, diversity, and I love this last part, and in case you didn't miss it, we're going to say it again, in all things, love. I've heard the term wake-up call. Y'all heard that term before you read it in the bulletin? I've heard it a lot since I've been your pastor. Wake-up call. When the white nationalists marched on Charlottesville, I heard people say, it's a wake-up call. A Nashville statement came out this week, put out by Christians to further marginalize the LGBT community. It was termed by many people a wake-up call. I heard the solar eclipse called a wake-up call. I heard Hurricanes Harvey and Irma referred to as wake-up calls. You know, I really don't believe when I read this passage this morning that the Apostle Paul cares what we use for an alarm. Because we already know what time it is. How the moment is now to wake up. To recover, to rediscover what is the heart of our faith, for salvation is coming near. The time has come to lay aside the works of darkness and put on the armor of light. So let's wake up and love our world. Let us love our city so purely that it stops traffic right on Rogers Avenue. Let us love our neighbors so unconditionally that it gets everyone's attention. Let us love so unreservedly that it brings tears to the eyes of strangers. Let us love so relentlessly that it gets even the most selfish, indulgent, and decadent one in this city to believe in something greater than themselves. Let us love so passionately that it turns people's hearts away from indifference and toward justice, away from reveling and drunkenness and toward self-denial and selflessness, away from debauchery and licentiousness, quarreling and jealousy, and toward empathy, compassion, sacrifice, and generosity. Let us love this creation so deeply together that it changes the world. Amen.